left off? All right, let me find our notes. We'll take off. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this day and for these folks who are here. Lord, as we study these plants, Lord, may we have some sense of just the importance of these things that you've made and the wonder of it all, just the diversity of life, how important they are. Lord, we can't survive without plants. And Lord, there is certainly beauty and intricacy in all the details that you have. Lord, help me to give them the things that are helpful and needful for their lives and for their studies, and Lord, not to bog them down with minutiae. Help them to study and to remember. We pray this in Jesus' name. All right, y'all. So we're on seedless plants. We looked last time at alternation of generations. We've been talking about needs for life on land as opposed to water. And really the big issue with life on land as opposed to water is gravity. Well, it's gravity and water. If you're in water, you don't have a water issue, right? You're surrounded by it. But if you live on land, it becomes a big issue, right? You either need to live somewhere where it's moist, or you need to live in the shadows and the shade where it will be there, but then you have light problems, or you need to be able to get water out of the ground. So we've been talking about plants. We know that there's plants with seeds and there are plants without seeds. There are plants with something called vascular tissue and plants that lack vascular tissue. You haven't looked into that yet. Vascular versus non-vascular. Were you even here? You don't know. Did we talk about vascular and non-vascular yet? We did? Okay, what is vascular tissue for?
Right?
Kind of.
Specific tissue
For transport, right? You have vascular. You've heard of a cardiovascular system, right? What does cardio mean? Heart, right? And vascular is referring to the transport of your cardiovascular system. You think that, okay, it's just pumping blood, but it's not that it's just pumping blood. In the blood, it's transporting nutrients from like your stomach to your tissues. It's transporting waste products from your tissues to like, liver and your something for, or to your bladder so that you can get rid of it. It's transporting oxygen from your lungs to your tissues. It's transporting carbon dioxide from your tissues to your lungs. It's moving things. It's like you probably won't think of it this way, but it's like highways, man. It's just being transported back and forth all over your body through your cardiovascular system. Now, same kind of idea is happening with a vascular system in plants. They're transporting, okay? The simplest plants don't have vascular tissue. They're not able to transport, not very efficiently. They can transport some through simple osmosis and diffusion. You remember those terms? No? Okay, well, we got to talk about that in a minute, okay? So, transport. Okay? When we talk about transport of any kind of organism, any kind of cell, there are really two big kinds. One is passive, and the other is active. Okay? When we talk about passive, what we're really going to talk about here is diffusion. It's the one we're worried about right now. Diffusion. And a subset of that is a very specific type of diffusion, which is called osmosis. So, passive versus active. Active, just the name itself implies that there's energy involved. Active transport, you're going to have to use some kind of energy. Passive transport, you don't need any energy. It's just going to happen naturally, okay? Diffusion is the movement of substances, of molecules from areas of high to low concentration, okay? So diffusion is simply the movement of molecules from high to low concentration. So if I had a bottle of cologne right here and I sprayed it, at second one, the only person who can smell it is me, right? In my area, it's going to be very highly concentrated. After 10 seconds, maybe, Thompson's going to be able to smell it. Max is going to be able to smell it. After 30 seconds, he's going to be able to smell it. Best I've ever done. After 45 seconds, Jackson's going to be able to smell it. It's going to move from high to low concentration. It's going to do that until it's equally dispersed everywhere. This is how things work. If you were to have a cup of water and you put a drop of blue food coloring in it, at first it's going to be blue on the top and clear on the bottom. But if you just left it over enough time, eventually it's going to be equally blue everywhere, right? That's diffusion, okay? Diffusion is very, very important. Sometimes it works on a plant or an animal's behalf to help them. Sometimes it works to harm them. So if you are, come back to that in a minute. Osmosis is a very specific type of diffusion, okay? It's defined as the movement of water. I'm just getting killed on these stupid markers, man. Movement of water across a selectively permeable membrane. If you're something like a moss, you need water. You don't have vascular tissue, you can't like grow into the ground and get water and absorb it and transport it up into leaves and things like that. The only way you can get water is for water to be around water and water to naturally want to flow into you. Lots of water on the outside, not as much inside, water will flow in, okay? But that means the opposite is also true. If I take a moss and it's living under a tree and everything's great, it's just osmosis is happening all the time, it's getting the water it needs, and I cut down the tree, what's going to happen to the moss? Water was flowing in, right? Nice cool area, lots of dew in the morning, but you get rid of the shade. Now there's more heat, there's more sunlight, there's more aeration, right? Transpiration. That water is going to flow, that was flowing into the moss is now going to flow out of the moss. Okay? Osmosis can work both ways. Let's talk about a fish. You take a freshwater fish. Where do they live? Say freshwater.
Freshwater.
It's in the name, right? Maybe take a trout, a perch, or whatever. Why can't I throw it in the ocean? What is it about the salt water?
It's water.
Huh?
Are there lungs?
No.
They just can't breathe in salt water.
Here's my freshwater fish. Okay. Here's my freshwater fish cell. Has some salts and things, some sugars and things in the cell, as all cells do. And here's my freshwater fish cell in freshwater. Does water want to flow into the cell or out of the cell? It wants to flow in because I've got a lot of solutes inside, not so many outside. Water wants to flow in.
Okay. All the cells on the outside, will the water flow out of the cell?
Yeah, you're picking up right away. So in freshwater, this fish has a certain issue. It's getting too much water in. It's actually got to pump the water back out. And freshwater fish are very well adapted to doing that, okay? You take that same cell and you put it in the ocean. All this salt everywhere. Does water want to flow in or out of that cell? wants to flow out. There's a greater concentration of water inside than outside because all the salt's outside. So now water wants to flow out. What happens to this cell as the water flows out? Think of a balloon. I got a balloon filled with water. I let the water out. What happens to the balloon? It shrivels up, right? And so this cell becomes this cell, right? Kind of sad looking, right? It has no method. These organisms have methods of pumping water out. They don't have a method of pumping salt out or of pumping water in because they are not adapted for that. Saltwater fish are, okay? This is one example of what's going on with osmosis. Sometimes it's beneficial, sometimes it's not. Often it's kind of both. You've got to have some way of regulating it. Something like a moss, it doesn't have any means of just going and searching after water, right? It's got to live somewhere where there's plenty of water, and that's that. And so it uses diffusion, and it uses osmosis. You take it out of that now. You're never going to find a moss in the desert. It's just not going to happen. Okay? Or if you do, it's going to have to like live in the shadow of a rock with lots of condensation, and generally speaking, you don't find mosses in the desert. You'll find them in cooler places. You'll find them in the shadows. Okay? Because they lack vascular tissue. They don't have the means of transporting stuff. So let's talk a little more about vascular tissue. Vascular tissue is going to come in two flavors, okay? One is xylem, and the other one is phloem. If you were to go outside and look at a tree, if you were to go hug a tree, you're hugging the phloem. You're not hugging the xylem. If you're going to build a house, you want to build with xylem. You don't want to build with phloem. So, take a look at a tree here. Okay. The xylem is going to be to the inside, and the phloem is going to be outside. Throw some other information at you that you need to know. Xylem transports water. Phloem is going to transport a little bit of water, but it's not the water that it's interested in transporting. It's interested in transporting sugars and salts and nutrients. The xylem at maturity is dead. Obviously, so it's made out of cells. Cells have to be alive to form, to grow, to make more, etc., etc. The xylem, the cells are alive when it's growing and forming, but as they mature, they actually die. They work best when they're dead. Whereas phloem is very much living cells. This is going to use passive transport. In particular, it's going to use something called capillary action. This is going to use active transport. It's literally going to pump. If I'm a tree, where am I going to get my water from? Roots. So which direction does water need to flow through xylem? It needs to flow up. If I'm a tree, where am I going to get my sugars from? Photosynthesis in the leaves. Where do I not naturally have any sugars? In the roots. But the roots are constantly growing, right? They're alive, they're making more, they're doing their thing. So if I'm a plant, I've got to move my sugars and stuff down. So primarily, I'm not saying that nothing moves up through phloem, that wouldn't necessarily be true, but primarily it's pumping things down. You go to a tree, right? Well, it's roots, things happening. Here's all this, we got leaves. Right? Where would I go to find water in a tree? Okay. I'm going to start down. Where's it going to flow? To the outside of the tree, like near the bark, or towards the inside? Inside. Inside. And my sugars, they're going to flow where? Down from inside or outside? Outside. That's going to happen on just below the bark. Just below the bark. Okay. So you, I'll let you do this. How do you know if a tree's alive or dead? We just bought a piece of property. It's got 8 1/3 acres. It's got all these trees.
The leaves are.
Some of them look pretty rough. And we were in winter. And I went with my son and I go, hey, let's find out if this tree's alive. He's 7, he doesn't know nothing about trees. He's learning for the first time. What did I show him? What did I do?
Bald.
Huh?
If it's bald.
Yeah, well, all of them were. They're oaks. It's the middle of winter.
You check if the branches are dry.
Check if the branches are dry, okay. What else can I do? You're on the right track.
Just cut it off.
I can cut one. What am I looking for? What's going to be there if it's alive that it's not if it's dead?
It's gonna be a little wet.
It's going to be a little wet. It's going to be a little green, right? It's going to be flexible, right? Because the phloem needs to be alive. Once the phloem dies, it's just going to be, a stick, and that's all there is to it. There's going to be no moisture. There's going to be no green whatsoever. And so I can simply come and check that. Now, but I can't check it by the bark. Right? The bark's not going to tell me if the tree's alive or not. Obviously, if the bark's all gone, that's not a good sign. But by and large, I can't look at the bark. I've got to look just below the bark. Like literally, I can take a knife and I can just spark off. If it's a little green, if it's a little moist, then I know, hey, that's the phloem, and it's alive. Where's the phloem on a tree?
Inside.
Not inside. Outside.
Oh, yeah.
Outside, right? Did I say that, or did I not? You
Did
didn't say it here, but let's write it. So xylem is inside.
you drew it?
Phloem is outside, not necessarily the very, very outside, but just inside. The phloem is what's going to make your bark, okay? Bark is made new every year, right? A tree, as it grows, it gets bigger, right? Every year it forms a new layer of xylem and a new layer of phloem. The phloem is constantly pushed out.
That's how you know the tree's age.
It's how you can tell a tree's age. What are you measuring in a tree's age?
The rings
Of what?
of the xylem.
Of xylem. Very good. Yep. Yep. Okay, and the phloem will reproduce new bark. What's the easiest way to kill a tree? A kid could do this. My children could go kill every tree on my property with a piece of string.
Tie on a tree.
And not just tie it. But you're on the right track. So look at how a tree is. Got this kind of layer of phloem right around the outside.
If you got the ring of the tree,
Yeah, all I have to do is cut one complete ring around the tree. I don't even have to go that deep. Quarter inch will do it. You get a young tree, you get a nice rough sturdy rope, and you just back and forth that thing, and you can kill the tree. Because when I do that, now I'm only doing the cutting the phloem, right? The xylem's on the inside, so water can still flow up all day long. But these roots, they need the sugars, right? Which means the sugars flow down, but they'll be cut off. So I'll have this gap where they can't flow through. And now there's no water getting to the roots. Well, the roots there's no sugars getting to those roots. Those cells are going to die. The plant's not going to be able to continue to grow, to get water. It's not going to be able to do the things it needs to do down here to get the water, the different tricks that it does with osmotic regulation, and the tree will die. Okay. Other fun fact while we're talking about this, if you want to get the best fruit you've ever had in your life, I mean just the juiciest, sweetest fruit you've ever had in your life, okay, and you're only worried about it for one season, we're not worried about the future of this tree, okay? Then on whatever branch I've got, right, I've got some leaves and things, and I've got my fruit. What makes it sweet? Sugars. But I'm sending a lot of sugars down, right? So all I have to do is ring this thing right here. Just take a piece of dental floss, and just get through the xylem. Now the sugars can't go down, they're all going to be here. They're all going to go into this fruit. It's going to be the sweetest, juiciest, most amazing fruit you've ever had. Now that branch is not going to be there next season, right? Well, maybe it would. Anyway, different tricks you can do. But the point is, what does xylem do? Transports water. What does phloem do?
where it sells sugars.
Sure. So, by the way, everything I'm saying right now, you got to know. Okay? Let's talk about xylem. Xylem is, when you get down to the cellular structure, at heart, it's like little tubes, little straws. Water's going to flow up. It's going to go against gravity with no energy whatsoever. None. How can I move water with no energy, no pumps, no artificial pressures? How can I get water to move up? Have you ever seen water just move up on its own? You have. If I had a puddle of water right here, let's just do it. Anybody got any water? Can I have a little of your water?
Yeah.
Okay. Very simple. I'm just going to pour a drop. That's all I'm going to do. So water's on the table. It's just sitting there. It's not going up. I'm not going to pump anything. I'm just going to touch this. What's the water doing? It's literally climbing up, right? Nothing magic to it. You've all seen this. It's climbing up against gravity, right? If you had first semester with me, and I'm sure I've said it again in this one, everything in biology is about charge and shape. Everything, including water moving at xylem. Water, its formula is H2O. I gotta erase some things here. I don't want to erase that. I'm gonna erase this. So water's formula is H2O, right? So I've got an oxygen and it's bonded to two hydrogens. Oxygen is more electronegative. I'm not going to go into what electronegative is right now, but all you need to know is it has a greater affinity, or electrons have a greater affinity for oxygen than they do for hydrogen, so they hang around a little more. The charge on an electron is negative. So the charge up here is going to be a little negative, and the charge down here is going to be a little bit positive. Okay? It's like a magnet. Every single water molecule is like a little tiny magnet, right? What is this negative end going to be attracted to? Huh? Something is positive. It's going to be repelled by something that is negative. Okay, good. That's principle number one. This is due to the fact that water bonding to itself, it does that. It's called cohesion. Cohesion is water bonded to water. Okay? It will stick to itself because I can get one of these oxygens, which is negative end, and it will be attracted to a hydrogen, right? And it's going to do this. It'll form even a lattice structure. Get another one down here, right? By the way, when I just have all of my water bonded like this, and it's just a solid crystal shape, what's that called? You encounter it all the time. Water bonded to itself like that, just all of it bonded all the way across in a giant crystal. What's it called? Ice. Ice. Right? When water is ice, they are all forming what these are called hydrogen bonds. All of it, it's all in cohesion together. It's not moving. When it's a liquid, it still has hydrogen bonds, but these form, they break, and they reform, but it's attracted like magnets, like flowing magnets. When I have no hydrogen bonds, when do I have no hydrogen bonds in water? When do I have no cohesion in water at all? When it's a gas, when it goes to steam, right? Very good. So, cohesion is water sticking to water. Do you think you're going to have to know that? I'd circle it, I'd do something with it. Water will not only stick to water, water will also stick to other charged things. That's called adhesion. Adhesion, okay? Adhesion is water plus a charged substance. So water will stick to this paper towel because of adhesion. That explains why I can take a spray bottle and I can have it sprayed up against this and the water will just stick, right? It'll just stick. Now, if the water droplets get big enough, what do? They float, gravity will get them and they'll fall down, right? But water will stick to this surface because this surface at its molecular level has charge. Regions of positive charge, regions of negative charge, regions of no charge. All over this thing at a molecular level that I can't see with my eyes, but I can experience it by the fact that water will stick to it. Okay? Now, water will stick to this paper towel because of adhesion. That is not enough for it to climb up the paper towel because the first water molecules are stuck to the paper towel. So now there's no room for the next water molecule to be stuck to the paper towel, and yet it doesn't just stick to it, it climbs up it. So the first water sticks to the paper towel, the second water sticks to
The first water.
water. That's cohesion. And now it actually, due to these other intermolecular forces, it kind of climbs up. And now it sticks to the paper towel, and that's adhesion. And then the next one sticks and it climbs up, and that's cohesion, and the next one adhesion, and it climbs up as long as it can until the force of gravity is greater than the forces of cohesion and adhesion. That's why water will stick up a paper towel. Cohesion and adhesion. You got that? Both of those two forces are what's happening in your vacuum, in your xylem. Okay? The difference is, this is where size matters. You want as much cohesion and adhesion as you can if you're trying to bring water up. Okay? If you have straw, if you had a glass of water and a straw, say you had your glass of water just completely full, like to the brim, and you stuck your straw in it, a little straw. What level's the water? Here, let's draw it.
Same level as the level on the cup.
This stupid thing. Okay, so I've got a cup. Okay, the cup is perfectly full with water, and I stick a straw in it. Where's the water level at in the straw?
Same level as is in the
Huh?
cup.
It's a little higher, because the water's going to stick to the edges of the straw. And it's going to stick to the water that's stuck to the straw. And so it will climb up this straw just a little tiny bit. If I have a big straw, it's barely going to climb. If I have a little tiny thin straw, the higher it will climb. If I put some little itty bitty narrow straw in here, that water will climb way up because of cohesion and adhesion. So these individual cells in your xylem, you want to be very, very narrow so that water will stick to them and stick to itself. It's like it's forming this bridge that can just go zoom. It's one aspect of what's happening in xylem to help it fight gravity. It does that naturally, just completely naturally, because of cohesion and adhesion. Just two properties of water. If water doesn't have, if oxygen is just slightly more electronegative than hydrogen, guess what? This does not work. And trees can't exist, and neither can you, because the same thing, what kind of action is this? What did I say this is called? I think I accidentally erased it, didn't I? Capillary action?
It was on there.
Yeah, it was, but I don't know where it went. I'm going to write it right here, okay? Capillary action. Do you have capillaries? You do. You have arteries, you have veins, the place where they crisscross, where it goes from being, by the way, artery away. So arteries are taking blood away from your heart, veins are bringing it back. A place where at your tissue level, where where it stops being artery, and then it's going to start being a vein, because we're done going away, and now we're going to start coming back. That's called a capillary bed, capillary. That's what this action is named after, because it's super, super thin. And yes, you do have a heart that's pumping, but at your capillary level, it wants to just flow through. There are things called capillary tubes. If you ever go get your blood drawn and they're checking for, to see if you have enough iron and whatnot, they'll take your blood and they'll take a capillary tube and they'll just touch it, and that blood will go zoop right up that thing. No pump. Against gravity, because of cohesion and adhesion. Okay? So this capillary action, that's what you're looking at here, okay? Capillary action. No energy required. None. There's one more factor that helps with this. I'm just gonna erase over here. It's terrible. There's another factor that happens. items here that's really, really useful. It's completely related to all of this. So, looking at this connection here, I'm going to draw a very small point, okay? Because it needs to be. I'm going to have water comes in here, right? Where do I need it? In my leaves. What do I need them in my leaves for? Photosynthesis. Other things that I need for photosynthesis. What must I, let's do photosynthesis. What plus what equals what plus what? 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O yields C6 H12 O6 plus 6O2. So, I'm going to get my water from here. Where am I getting my carbon dioxide from? Air. So I've got it. Remember I drew the other day, I drew this little pore type thing, right? And it had cells called guard cells. This is called a stomata. Okay? So I've got to open this so that my CO2 can come in. I want that. I want to get my oxygen out. But while this is open, I accidentally lose water also. Because water will evaporate out, and the loss of water through a stomata is called transpiration. Right, this is transpiration. You must know that word. Okay? Transpiration is the loss of water through a stomata. Water comes in through my roots, flows up through my xylem, into my leaves, and ultimately when I open this to breathe, I'm going to lose some through the stomata. That's called transpiration. Okay? Go ahead and get that down for a second, and I'm going to show you why this matters and how it relates to the flow of water, right? Water is a polar molecule. It has charge. Slight charge on the oxygen, slight charge on the hydrogen. They attract to each other. It's called a hydrogen bond, or the interaction between these regions of charge is called a hydrogen bond. But water sticking to water is called cohesion. Water sticking to charged stuff is called adhesion. Okay, so if, and this is an important if, they actually, this if needs to be, if I have a continuous column of water from my roots, through my shoots, to my leaves, to my stomata, if they're all connected, then it's like a giant magnetic chain, right? So when I pull one out here, when one evaporates here, what does it do to the next one?
Comes up.
Pulls it up. And when that moves up, it moves the other one up. And so there's this, basically this vacuum pressure that happens. You got a lot of water down here, right? Presumably, right? So positive or negative pressure. Does water want to flow in or out?
No.
It wants to flow in, right? Just by diffusion. So I've got a positive pressure here, right? High pressure.
Yeah, yes, right.
And here, if I'm sucking it out, is that, think about that. You suck on a straw, right? You're creating a vacuum. Negative pressure inside, right? I've got negative pressure here. Everything in nature flows from high to low. High pressure for the water, low pressure to water. The water wants to flow with that current, right? From high to low. And so just the loss of water actually helps to pull the next bit of water up with it. So long as I have a continuous, what we call a column of water, a continuous water column. You get some roses. in water, in a few days they are, say, dead. Dead. Two things that you can really do to help your your roses live. One is you can take that little packet of nutrients they give you, and you can put that in there. It has nutrients, which is good, but your roses aren't doing a bunch of photosynthesis anyways. But those nutrients are going to have things like antimicrobial factors, and so like mold and stuff won't be able to grow and kill your flowers quickly. So that'll help. Another thing that you can do to greatly help them is you can cut off the bottom of them and reestablish the water column. Because as they sit there and that bottom dries out, there's no, and they lose water through the top, there's nothing for it to pull. But if you just stick them in water and those cells at the bottom are like dead and gross and stuff, they can't pull the water anyways. But if you'll just cut them off, now the plant can start pulling water again. Okay, so you can reestablish this water column. So the water column is an important thing. I lose water up here, I need to get it down here. As long as it's in contact, I can keep pulling water to replace the water that I've lost. And that helps with the flow of water through xylem. Capiche? Okay. Good. And this works great as long as I have high pressure down here. This does not work great. In fact, this is actually a problem if I live in an area without water, right? What kind of plants live in places without a lot of water? Cacti, for sure. Yeah, cacti are amazing. They have stomata. They don't open them during the day. What's an advantage to opening your stomata at night instead of in the day?
Can't lose water fluid.
And you don't lose as much water because it's not as hot. Not as much transpiration at night as you would during the day. That's pretty neat stuff. All right. You take, Lord willing, this year I'll get a garden in again. Didn't get one last year. I hope to this year. Right? My garden's going to kick butt in like April, May, June. What's going to happen in August? It's going to start to dry up, right? Because we won't have as much water in the ground. But the leaves are open, right? Stomata's open for business. We're losing water, but nothing to replace it. That plant's slowly going to dry and shrivel, right? Movement of water through, or loss of water through stomata is called transpiration. The flow of water through xylem. Give me a word that helps that happen. Capillary action, good. The whole idea of the pressure, right? What's that about? It's my water column, right? Just it's moving it like, and the water column thing and the capillary action thing, they both come back to this idea of charge and shape, cohesion and adhesion, right? It's the same reason that water climbed up the paper towel. You didn't know you were going to get all this physics and chemistry today. But here it is. We needed this to understand what's happening in a plant. And we talked about all of this, because you have to know all this, but we talked all this to talk about the fact that a moss doesn't have any of this. Which is why you're not going to see a moss live. A moss doesn't have roots. A moss can't grow tall. A moss can't just live out in the open in the desert. It can't get water. It doesn't have a water column. It relies simply on osmosis. It's got to live wet. Has to. One, because it has no means of getting water. But two, if you'll remember from doing your alternation of generations thing, it has sperm that have to swim through the water. Can't do that if you don't have water, right? Can't reproduce. All right. What time is it?
10:20.
Good goodness, that happened quick. Do you know I didn't plan on talking about any of that today? I mean, I knew we would, but I didn't know it would be today. Here we go. So, other adaptations against, remember the whole thing of life on land, it's twofold. Our two great needs. One, we must have, say water. Water, and two, we must be able to fight gravity. Gravity's always trying to bring you down. Think about that. Thompson, what height are you?
Sorry?
What height are you? How tall are you?
5'11".
Huh?
5'11".
5'11". What height would you be on the moon? I bet you'd be at least 6 foot, maybe 6'1", 6'2". Astronauts are always taller in space, or when they get first back. Why?
Gravity.
Because gravity bringing you down. So you're 5'11". You didn't know that? I mean, just think of it. Literally, like the air around you is pushing down on your head. It's like, I mean, whatever height you are right now, if I came and just yanked down on your spinal column, you would begin to come down, right? You're used to it. But the air over your head is literally pushing you down with tremendous force, right? You'd be a little bit taller up on top of a mountain. Little. Because there'd be, first of all, you'd be a little, just incrementally, unnoticeably further away from the center of the earth. But also because there's less air up there to push down on you. How much more so in space, where there's no gravity and there's no air pushing down on you? Conversely, you're 5'11". How tall would you be on Saturn? It has a lot more gravity, right? Has a lot more atmosphere and a lot more pushing down on you. I mean, he would be shrunk up, right? Does any of that matter for this? No. My point is, I'm really trying to get through to you that gravity is quite literally pulling you down, right? A tree has to be able to fight gravity. Has to. A tree has to be able to stand up in a storm, right? Right? To fight gravity, you've got to be, if you're a tree. You got nothing for me? You got no brains? We can't think?
Gravity big.
Huh?
Tall.
Okay, here, let's do this. Let's do this. I want you to stand up this piece of paper. Actually, I'd like you to stand 2 pieces of paper as best you can. Well, I'll just do this for a second. I'm going to run out of these. Let's see. Make these pieces of paper stand up as tall as you can. You can do whatever you want with it. I want you to, you've got 2 pieces of paper, I want you to get them as tall as you can. Do it now, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure to do that. But it looks like a tower of Pisa.
Y'all got the point, or you're getting the point, right? You need this paper, which is naturally very floppy, right? Here's my piece of paper. Here's my piece of paper standing up. Ready, set, go. That didn't work out too well. You've got to take this thing that's floppy and make it, what word? Say rigid.
Rigid.
Rigid. You've got to make it rigid. And that's what you guys have been working on doing. Some more successfully. Some of you guys did great at 2, right? But are you going to be able to get these 10 tall? Will yours go 10 tall just like that? Let me see what you did.
Probably not.
I don't believe you. I do not believe either one. I think you couldn't stack them 4 tall right now.
Let's do it.
I think you've got the best shot with yours, probably. It's probably going to be the most rigid. Yep. There's a, here, you get the idea. You need to take something that's floppy and you need to make it rigid if it's going to stand up against gravity, right? That's the same thing with the cells of a plant. And so you can't, look at me, xylem, nice and rigid. Phloem, very loose and floppy, okay? A moss, very loose and floppy. You've got to get it rigid. Let's knock these out. I'll puff and I'll blow your paper down. So you've got to, if you're a plant, you've got to become rigid so that you can stand up against gravity, because gravity's bringing you down. But you can't be too rigid. Why can't you be too rigid? Rigidity also brings brittle, right? If you're too rigid, you're brittle. You're not supple. Think about sports. You may hear this, especially with defense. Bend, don't break, right? Right? You need to be able to flex. You need to be able to move a little bit. A tree can do that. The xylem in a tree can do that, right? If it's completely rigid and along comes a serious storm, what's going to happen? It's going to snap. But you see a good wind come, a good, like serious wind, 50, 60 miles per hour. Do you see trees generally just snapping? No, they move, right? So that's what's really cool about xylem. It is very, very rigid, but it also is a little flexible, right? So it allows it to fight gravity without just like snapping. It's like little wooden straws, okay? Now, these at one time were cells. Those cells are now dead. What's left of those cells? Huh? The cell wall. Very good. The cell wall is all that's left. They reinforce these cell walls with something called lignin to help to toughen them up. Okay? You bite into a grape. What's so great about a grape? Even if you had no taste, what's great about a grape? It's got a little bit of texture, right? Now, you said the crunchiness. What if I had a grape that was like 3 weeks old? Not moldy, but just 3 weeks old. What's that going to be like? What's that experience going to be like? Mushy, right? Get lost in water. So there's not a lot of pressure against those cell walls. But you ever been into like a nasty pear? Like a hard pear?
Hard,
Yeah. The tissue in that pear is I'm not saying it is xylem, but it's a little more like xylem. A lot more lignin going on. It's just like, it's literally like, oh, not a pleasant experience, right? Different tissues, different stuff for different functions. Okay. Two types of vascular tissue. What are they? Xylem and phloem. Which one's alive? Phloem. Which one does water? Which one does nutrients? How does xylem move water 2 ways? You just reading the board, folks. Just lectured on this whole thing. Did it get in those heads? Capillary action. Good. What is capillary action? Movement through little tiny tubes. What are the tubes made out of in xylem? Cell walls. Okay. In the individual tubes, are they big or are they little? Little. The littler they are, the better the capillary action. Right? Capillary action works. It's great, but it only goes so far. Right? I can stick, literally, like try this at home. Get a little tiny straw, the small straw you can, stick it in the water, and look at the edge. The water will climb up the straw. The narrower the straw, the higher it will climb. The wider the straw, the less it will climb. But it will climb in any kind of a straw. In fact, if you ever had a chemistry class, you were probably taught to read. You were taught to do something like this. Here's your thing, your graduated cylinder, and there was this. You were taught to read the bottom of this thing because at the edges the water climbed it. That's capillary action. It's cohesion and adhesion at work. Right? Okay. Okay. So capillary action. The other thing that's helping water to climb up xylem is transpiration. As long as there's an intact water column, then as I move a molecule out, the next one gets moved up, right? It's like a little chain of water magnets. And another thing that's related to that is pressure. I've got positive or negative pressure water pressure at the leaf. Do I have positive or negative water pressure at the leaf?
Negative.
Negative, right? It's flowing, it's pulling it out. Positive or negative at the roots? Positive. So as long as I keep that water column, water's naturally, everything about water with a plant is, as long as it's intact, is wanting it to move up with no energy input. None. The water column and the evaporation, the water pressure, the capillary action. And if water just changes its polarity, this doesn't work. Do you understand how fine-tuned the universe is? You change the electronegativity, the difference between oxygen and hydrogen. This doesn't work. And there are no plants, which means there's nothing that eats plants, which means we can't exist. You change the tilt of the earth just slightly, and we're stuck in a permanent winter or a permanent summer. You have no seasons. You move us a little closer, a little further away from the sun, and you either have too much light or you have too little light. You take away Jupiter, and now there's not the gravity of Jupiter to prevent asteroids from just pelting the Earth. You put us much closer to the sun, and you get more electromagnetic radiation, and your cells can't exist because you're just being bombarded with solar material. You slow the spin of the Earth down so that there's not the two poles and something called the Allen belts that function like magnetic fields to take all the solar wind that's coming at the Earth and take it to the poles instead of letting it bombard you. You can't exist. Everything in the universe is perfectly finely tuned. I mean, literally, xylem and phloem are crying out that there is a creator who made everything perfect. Perfect. If it's not exactly this way, life cannot exist. It is amazing. All right, what time do I have? Just a little bit. So my two enemies, if I'm a plant, are gravity and water loss. One thing that I want to talk about with water loss is, why is it that plants lose water through the stomata, but not just through everywhere? Think about a tulip, straw tulip. Tulips are easy. Everybody can draw a tulip. I don't care how artistic you are not. You ready? Maybe this is your first time to draw a tulip. Let's draw a tulip. Start by doing this, kind of a cup shape. Now just kind of swirl over, and give one more. Tulip. Give yourself a stem, draw a leaf. There's a tulip. Why isn't a tulip just losing water everywhere? It's green. It's very, very green. Why is it only losing water through its stomata? By the way, these stomata are like all over these leaves. Especially on the underside. Why the underside and not the top side?
Because the sun doesn't hit the other side.
Less sun, less transpiration. Good. Okay. So I got these little stomata everywhere. Why am I losing water only through the stomata and not through the space between the stomata?
Because they, but there's,
Borders stay open, that's one thing. And
Okay, so literally being open, just here's just an open hole. What else?
and also like according to pressures, like for example, photosynthesis happens in the thing, which means it's like getting water there, not like everywhere else when it's flowing.
Oh man, there's water in all these cells, just chock full. If I were to puncture these cells, it would just like ooze water. Especially if I put it in a lot of water.
Yeah,
So
I guess,
why isn't it?
I guess it would just be the,
You ready?
no,
We back out. Go like this, right? Go, step. Do it. You didn't do it. Come on, humor me here. What came out of your mouth right there?
CO2.
CO2, but if I went up to a piece of glass and went, what do you see on the glass? Fog, because the fog is
Hot.
water.
Water.
You breathed out water. You didn't mean to, but you did. You lose water through breathing. It's the same way they do. It's never. You don't mean to, but there it is. Right now, why aren't you just losing water everywhere? Why is it only coming out here? What do you have that keeps you, because every cell you have is just chock full of water. Why are you not losing water nonstop? Why is it just evaporating off of you? Because you have skin to keep it in, right? And that skin has coating, right? Lots of protein and stuff. The skin, the cells of your skin are different than the cells inside of the rest of your body to help protect against that, to keep inside things in and outside things out. You wouldn't want your stomach being made out of the same cells your skin is. You wouldn't be able to absorb. If I go swim in the ocean, do I absorb all the salt water? No. But if I drank all the salt water, would I absorb all the salt water? Yeah, there's a difference in permeability. The cells in your stomach are highly permeable. They're made for the free flow of stuff. The cells out here are not. So you have skin that's an adaptation so that you don't just lose water like crazy. Plants don't have that quite. What do they have outside of themselves? Waxy cuticle. Covered in wax. Helps them to keep water in, helps them to keep other stuff out. It's pretty neat, don't you think? Yeah. Of course, in other places they've got stuff like bark. That's going to help, right? As a barrier. But when you get down to like the shoots, the stems, the leaves, where it's nice and green and supple and flowing with water, especially that's why I drew a tulip. Right? Anything like a tulip, an iris, any of these that are about to go crazy blooming here in the early spring, go check them out. They're going to be waxy to the touch. If you were to pour water on them, that water's just going to flow right down, right? It's not going to do cohesion. Well, it'll do cohesion, but it's not going to do adhesion. It's not going to stick to that because wax is not a non-polar molecule. Yes, sir? All right. So what's their number one adaptation to help them grow tall against gravity?
vascular tissue.
Which one in particular? Xylem, to help stand up, right? Good. And what are some adaptations against water loss? You know more than you think you do.
Oh, waxy cuticle.
Waxy cuticle, what else?
Is it the fluid being outside the xylem?
Okay,
The
so
xylem
foam
being
outside the xylem might help insulate a little bit. Good. What else?
The bark.
Huh?
The bark.
The bark. What else?
Stomata.
What is it about stomata?
That's where it breathes in and out.
Yeah. So what if I was losing water too much? What could I do?
Close this.
Close it. What are those cells outside of this? I always draw it the same way. What are these two cells called?
Fat cells.
Guard cells. So here's it's one of those God things. It's amazing. So let's draw some guard cells. And these, like, It's amazing how they work. So a stomata itself is just this, like this pore, you know, it's like just this hole that's there, okay? And when everything's good, I want that hole to be exposed, I want it to be open, okay? But when it's bad, I want to cover that hole, and the hole never changes. The hole doesn't change shape. It's not it's like your mouth where you're like, ha, ma, ma. You're like, that doesn't work, right? That's not how it works for them. Now, deep inside of your mouth, what do you have? You got a trachea, you got an esophagus, you got a lot of, like, you have a hole back there that doesn't really change, right? So you don't change the hole, you cover the hole or open the hole, right? Access to it. Same thing here. So when life is good, you have these cells called guard cells, and they will do this, okay? But when times are tough and there's not enough water, you need those same cells to close. And they can do this. There's no brain here. They can do this on their own. When there's lots of water everywhere, including in these cells. And so these cells, it's like a water balloon. The water flows in and it changes its shape. It experiences something called turgor pressure. Turgor pressure. This is the pressure of water against cell walls. As that water is in there and it's pushing against the cell wall, it's literally pushing, it changes the shape of it, and it forces this thing open. Okay? But when there's no turgor pressure, this thing is what's called flaccid. So we have turgid and we have flaccid. When it's flaccid, it basically shrivels. And when it shrivels, it covers over the mouth. And there's plenty of water, which is the time that I want to do photosynthesis, the time I want this to be open. There's a lot of turgor pressure, it's pushing against it, and it forces them into this shape. But as I lose water here, and it's not replaced, I'm also going to lose water here, and it's not going to be replaced, and so it's going to shrivel and it's going to close up. And so it does this naturally. It does not have to be told. It doesn't need a brain. It's so amazingly finely tuned. All right. We'll be done for today. Pick up more next time. Throw more. I'm very used to it anymore.